Episode 7 of Welcome to Derry isn't only the best episode of the season so far, but it's the episode that had me on the edge of my seat for the longest, hiding behind my hands the most and feeling the most overwhelming sense of emotion that I felt when watching the show. From the incredible opening scene that showed us just how close Ingrid and her father was, why it decided to adopt the persona of Pennywise the clown, to the burning of the black spot, and the stylistic yet upsetting response that it triggered, and also the reawakening of Pennywise and the real reason why the Air Force wanted the pillars that made Derry a cage. This was an episode to remember, and one of the best episodes of TV of the year for sure. So let's dive into this video and discuss everything Welcome to Derry episode 7. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The opening scene. This opening scene was important for a number of different reasons. Opening up in 1908, it took us back to the time period of episode 3, which is when General Shaw was first introduced to us as a kid, and when he also saw it for the first time. What the entire point of this scene was to show us how close Ingrid was with her father Bob Gray, and why it is that she missed him so much in the present day, but also to show us why it decided to adopt the persona of Pennywise the clown. This is because it saw how the children were infatuated with Pennywise and that Bob Gray didn't need to go to the children came to him. Which ultimately meant that if it adopted that very persona, then it would make his hunting far easier than what it was currently doing. This was highlighted most when they jumped on stage after and Pennywise even had to run off, with it watching from a window in the distance whilst posing as a child. He saw everything that happened and that if he were to adopt it, he'd be spoiled for choice. There was something kind of haunting but also pure about seeing Pennywise the clown being played by Bob Gray and having fun on the stage. The children were laughing, smiling and enjoying what they were watching. The first time we've seen anybody in the show react like that to Pennywise. This was a character that Bob cared about, he created by himself and once performed in the circus in front of screaming crowds, something that he had a dream of returning to. But with it taking this character that Bob loved and spent his life working on, it brought the screaming crowds back in front of him but in a completely different way, as now they were screaming in fear, not with laughter. When Ingrid and Bob were together, we saw the love that they had for one another and how she idolized her father. Ingrid had been working on her clown character in secret because she wanted to impress her father, and Bob was proud of her, even calling out that haunting line that Pennywise eventually said to Ingrid later on in the episode, "Show me the bow." What was quite strange in this episode though was that Ingrid saw the blood on her father's handkerchief which alluded to him being dead, but when Ingrid spoke with Lily she said how he left town with the carnival. So I don't quite understand why she lied to Lily about that. I'm just guessing maybe because in 1935 she saw him again and then maybe she put 2 and 2 together. When Bob Gray was eventually waiting for his evening show, the young child that it was posing as wanted Bob to go into the woods with him, and the entire time I was just sitting there as my body was tightening up because even though it was obvious that he was going to go with him, there was a part of me that was just wanting him to turn around and get away, but sadly we obviously didn't see that. The young kid said to Bob about how his parents were missing, and Bob said how his parents were too because they were dead. I wonder if in this moment it thought that was a fear of Bob's, the lack of parents, and it used that because it thought it would drive sympathy. The opening scene concluded with Lily finding out about her father being gone, and the Irish shot technique, which was popularized in the 1910s and 1920s in cinema, felt like an appropriate way for it to end, even if this is said ever so slightly before it was mainstream. This scene really did a good job at getting across why it is that it wanted to adopt the persona of Pennywise. The children loved Bob as the character, and it simply meant that it was going to make its feeding cycle far easier in the future. The burning of the black spot. This is a moment that I feel the show had been building towards, and it was arguably the most beautiful in terms of the way that it was structured and carried out, but it was the most heartbreaking scene in the entirety of the show. When the former chief and the Legion of White Decency walked into the black spot, the tension that was present felt like it was actually a force in the room. This thick wall of hatred towards each side felt like it was unavoidable and it transcended through the screen. I actually loved the moment when the people that were enjoying the black spot surprised the former chief and the other men by pulling out their weapons. It put them on the back foot and it
actually made me laugh because you could see that they felt outdone in that moment. When they eventually left, the single-take shot of everything that occurred was immersive, frightening, nightmare-inducing, and just outright horrific. When Rich looked out that window and the camera followed him round over his shoulder, seeing these masked figures just lighting up the bottles to throw in and block the door so it essentially became an oven, it was just inhumane. The single-take shot really allowed us to feel the pain, the heat, the screams, and the suffocation that felt like was present. Our vision was almost like what the people in there were experiencing. It was getting smokier and smokier, and the haze just felt impenetrable. I thought the Legion of White Decency were going to stop once they lit up the black spot, which was torturous enough, but when they then started firing into the building and people were being taken out left, right, and center, it showed just how inhumane they were and how they viewed black people as different to them. It was awful, and it painted a haunting reality of a time that did actually exist in the world. One thing that I found so frightening about it all was that Pennywise was just capitalizing on the horrors that were occurring and was feasting on victims that were there. When Hallorann was going to escape through the crawl space and he spoke to one of the dead, that was a moment when my stomach dropped too, because he said before how as long as he didn't speak with them, then they wouldn't know where he was. Pennywise revealed himself to Hallorann in this episode, and he said the line, "Hello, Dickie," as he walked towards him. Honestly, that slight rasp that Bill Skarsgård gives Pennywise and the high-pitched laugh that he has really allows there to almost be this demonic edge to the clown, which is perfect because of the strange entity that he is, but it just gets me every time because it's a voice that you feel like you genuinely hear in your nightmares. Former Chief Bowers eventually left and said how there'd be no survivors because they were cooking inside there, and as he left, I was genuinely sitting there thinking that I hope that he gets everything that's coming to him. He deserves to face repercussions for that, and I hope he doesn't get to walk off scot-free. There was guilt in one of the men's eyes as they all left, but he knew what he'd done and the death that it caused, but he didn't have the bottle to stand up to the men that he was around, instead having a hand in the death of many people inside of there. Even though the horrors of the burning of the black spot took center stage and were heartbreaking, arguably the saddest moment, which, in my opinion, even topped the opening scene of the first episode where Phil, Teddy, and Susie were killed, was when Rich sacrificed himself for Marge. Rich knew that the roof was going to fall, and he told her to get inside of a box to protect herself. He wanted to be the knight that she told him that he was in the previous episode, and he wanted to protect his fair maiden. Honestly, this scene was beautiful. Not only was it beautiful because we saw Rich doing the most heroic thing possible for somebody that he loved and reminiscing on the first time that he laid eyes on her, but the music that accompanied it. Wow, it had my heart in pieces and me calling for a tissue because my eyes were getting wet. There was this choral, somber piece that was accompanying him talking about how he felt about Marge, and he even kissed a box when he told her that he loved her. We always knew Rich was a standout guy, but with his plane landing in the sewers in the previous episode, which foreshadowed his death, we saw it actually playing out this time round. The final arm to the burning of the black spot that we saw taking place was focused on Ingrid and her arriving in her Pennywinkle outfit. Stan, her husband, was a part of the Legion of White Decency, and he said she'd be black and blue if she didn't take it off and get home, which showed us the abusive person that we thought he was based on how we spoke to her a couple of episodes back. But what was interesting here was that Pennywise appeared behind him and absolutely annihilated him, causing her to not even care in the slightest. This death was absolutely gruesome, even feeding on him right in front of her after. Ingrid believed that Bob Gray was still inside of Pennywise, and that's why she told the former chief that Hank was inside of the black spot, because she knew that it would lead the kids there and Pennywise would then get a feast of some kind, showing that Ingrid didn't care about Hank in the way that we all thought that she did. At this point, Stan marked the final kill of the feeding cycle, but with Ingrid telling Pennywise that she didn't want him to leave, she then realized that the monster that was in front of her wasn't her father. Pennywise referred to himself as Pennywise your dancing daddy, and he then entered this animalistic state in saying that he ate Bob Gray, but he still lived inside of him. This was a strange way to see Pennywise act because he was playing on Ingrid's biggest fear right in front of her eyes, mentally manipulating her with words rather than visuals. The trauma of losing her father was the biggest pain that had plagued her life, and Pennywise was mocking it. I thought it brought a realness to the entity for the first time in a long while. When back inside of the black spot, Marge was rescued by the firefighters, and here we saw lifeless Rich with his eyes open, an image that was upsetting to look at, and it showed us the true hero that he was. This was an episode that really did make us realize that they were just kids. Rich had spent his time at school on his own and wanted to have a group of friends, and the saddest shot of the entire episode was this one. Will, Marge, and Ronnie all hugging his lifeless body, comforting him because it took him to death to find the very thing that he always wanted. It was so sad. The military's secret plan. With Hallorann speaking with the dead, he was able to see a former dead war chief, and it was at her grave where one of the pillars was actually located. This led the military to being successful in digging one up. However, for the entirety of the show, we were under the impression that General Shore wanted to weaponize the entity so that it would be used against Russia during the Cold War and to inflict fear into them. But in reality, it was actually about Shore using it on the American people with the hopes of preventing a civil war from occurring. Shaw could see the divide that was forming within the nation, and he believed that the greatest threat to it was coming from within. So he wanted to open the cage and plant fear within the American people so that it would prevent them from being at war with one another. If it didn't just have the containment of Derry, but the entire nation, then he believed that it would be a better nation. That's why it seemed like they were trying to destroy the pillars, so the cage would essentially be opened and no longer exist. When the pillow went into the machine, as it was heating up, we got a glimpse into where Pennywise seems to hibernate inside of his sewer, and it instead triggered a response and caused him to wake up. They've disrupted his sleeping cycle, and I feel like the town of Derry is most definitely going to pay the price for it now. Will even became a victim to Pennywise right at the end of the episode, which showed that Pennywise was now operating outside of Derry as he slipped through the gap. So in the next episode, I feel we're going to see the group going into the sewers with the hopes of finding Will. Lily does have the shard as a weapon after all, and despite the fact that she looked like she was losing her mind with her just sitting silently at the end of the bed, something which could potentially foreshadow her troubled future, we'll see her rejoin the Losers Club with the hopes of finding Will. My review of the episode. I thought this was hands down the best episode that the show's given us, and you could arguably say one of the best episodes of television of the year. The first half was filled with so much action, it established a backstory, and it just flew by so quickly. There was immersion and tension from the moment that it opened because we didn't truly know what was going to happen, and the payoff, well, it was immense. That immersion that was present during the burning of the black spot was something that I didn't expect to feel as much as I did. I almost felt like I was having to see through the smoke and cover my ears from the deafening screams that were present. Visually, it was stunning, and emotionally, it was heart-shattering. The underpinning racism that's within the show has been there ever since it first opened, but seeing it reach its peak in this one really brought to light the evils that are and can be present in the world. The death that was being caused from the lack of any remorse was just shocking. When it came to Pennywise, he was simply incredible in this episode. This was the best feature of him for sure. Whether it be the eyes, the smile, the laugh, the tone of voice, and even the pitch, the playful nature paired with the evil acts really does make this character the stuff of nightmares, and I think this version of Pennywise beats the one that Skarsgård did in the It movies. As this episode was unfolding, I was questioning if and how the finale could be stronger because it was genuinely a top-tier episode, but after watching the trailer, I think it's going to arrive at it for sure. I love the fact that Pennywise has been disrupted from his sleep and the military have made the entire situation worse for themselves by disturbing him. Trouble is back in town, as was highlighted by the 1962 song from the Wilburn Brothers as it played over the credits, and I can't wait to see how this very trouble's going to escalate. So, there you have it. It Will Come to Derry Episode 7, Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos on It Welcome to Derry, then check the playlist below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of the episode? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.